This is episode 11 of Youthful Perspectives. I'm your host, Mason Beerbaum. My guest today is Riley Hetland. Riley is a second-year environmental sciences policy and management student at the University of Minnesota. On top of this, Riley is the Director of Civic Engagement at the university's Undergraduate Student Government and is the president of the UMN Mock Trial Association. Currently, Riley is running for president of student government at the University of Minnesota. Our conversation is centered around her dedication to social causes during high school and college, and her proposals to improve the University of Minnesota for all students. It was a pleasure to sit down and hear her great, proactive, and authentic ideas for our campus. I hope you come away with a similar feeling. And now, here is Riley Hetland. Thank you, Riley, for coming on the podcast today. I appreciate it. Start off right away with the first question. Where did you grow up and what high school did you attend?
So I grew up in Apple Valley, Minnesota, which is like 20 minutes south of our cities here. I went to Eastview High School. With my graduating class was like 650 kids, so it was a pretty big high school.
Okay, awesome. And when you were in high school, what kind of activities were you involved in?
I did so many things. I was mainly focused in speech and debate, and so I did both of those all 4 years. I was a category captain in speech, shout out discussion. Loved that. I was in this other club called Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America, which was absolutely awesome. It was basically all about teaching leadership skills at like the high school level and then teaching students how to like take their leadership skills and apply it through community service. And so I absolutely loved that. And then I became the president of that organization at my high school and competed nationally with my service projects, and I absolutely loved that. I played soccer for a while, then I injured my ankle, and so then I really leaned into that more speech and debate and community service stuff, which I'm so happy that that's how it worked out because I absolutely love everything that I was able to do through that.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I loved high school activities. I was from a small high school myself, so there was like limited clubs or activities to be a part of, so coming from a high school that you attended where there's a lot more students to be involved in things and a lot more resources to like do these sort of activities, very beneficial, it seems like, for you. You also mentioned how you were big on like community development and social justice work. Can you highlight any examples that you've been involved in regarding those two fields?
Yeah, so that was my life, basically still is my life. That's what really drives me to do everything that I do. I think it really started when I was like 14. I was obviously in Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America, or FCCLA, like I said earlier. And so that was a lot of like leadership building and community service things. So through that, I heard of this nonprofit called Youth Thrive, which was all about basically inspiring youth to take action in their communities. So I heard about that and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to join this. And so it started off as like me writing monthly articles about issues that are going on in my community and things that we can do to remedy it, like encouraging other students across Minnesota to notice the issues in their community. And then that turned into doing a ton of really, really great work. And then I ultimately ended up becoming a co-chair of the Minnesota cabinet of Youth Thrive. And then when I got to college, I stayed in Youth Thrive and was a part of their scholars program, and then eventually worked up to be more of like on the administrative side of Youth Thrive, which I'm so happy I was able to do. And so it was awesome. I got to talk about and write about and inspire other people to do the social action things that I was a part of. So to name a few, like when I was in high school, I worked really, I focused mainly on mental health. So I was a sophomore when we started coming back from COVID. So like doing like the hybrid models, and then sometimes we'd just get sent home for weird periods of time, and then we'd come back and then try to figure out our new normal. And so I noticed at my school, which is known across Minnesota to be very, very like a very stressful environment. We prioritize test scores. We score in the top 5 high schools, public high schools in Minnesota, like pretty consistently. And so because of that, there's like a lot of academic pressure on these students. Mm-hmm. So coming back from COVID, it was that normal stress that students already experience on top of trying to fit in after being away for a year. So I surveyed my entire high school about like their stress levels, how much sleep they're getting, do they feel like they can talk to people, and like were there any other issues that they were experiencing, just trying to assess all the different avenues of like mental health concerns that these students could be affecting. and an overwhelming majority, I think it was 91% of students, said that stress impacts them on the daily basis, and that they do have anxiety about coming back to school. So that was extremely alarming to me. I had got, again, over 1,000 responses, and so that many students said that they were experiencing extreme high levels of stress and other mental health concerns. I knew I needed to do something, so I went to my representative, who also attended my high school, Erin McQuaid, and I showed her all of his data, and I testified for a bill that would basically increase mental health resources in public high schools, because we only had one mental health professional across all 4 high schools in our district, which, when you have 900 students say that stress is impacting them at an extremely high level every day just in one high school, you're going to need more support and you need more staff. And so that was a really clear issue to me that I knew I needed to take action on. So I tried to work through. That bill ultimately did not get passed, but I think that really sparked something in me that I knew I needed to keep noticing issues in my community and trying to work the best I can and do whatever I can to help. So I was 16 when that happened, and I worked really, really hard to try to combat that after the bill ultimately did fail. So I started incorporating more mental health things through all of the other things I was a part of in high school. So whether that was through NHS, I was on the board of my high school's NHS, and then also in FCCLA. And so we did mental health events. So we would just bring in service dogs to some kind of like paws, actually, that we have on campus here. So we'd bring in service dogs for students during finals weeks and just try to really combat stress levels and make sure that students had coping mechanisms that they needed, because there was extremely long wait times to go into our mental health professional because there was only one for the 4 high schools in our district. So just making sure that students were supported in other ways. And so we went into all of the classrooms and all of the their homerooms and gave them individual things they can work on and things that they can do in their friend groups to provide them with resources if they needed them. So we did that and tried to support them in any other way that we could, through hosting events and advocacy stuff. And so we just tried to support them. I tried to support them in any way I could. And so that was the first taste of real community development stuff that I worked on. And then that turned into a ton of different service projects, things for veterans in my community, things for first responders. And then coming to college, obviously I got to be a lot more passionate and use the skills that I developed on a smaller scale when I was in high school to try to make more change. So what that looked like is, I'd say first, last winter break, I went to the U.S.-Mexican border for a class, and we interviewed community leaders and talked to them about all of the struggles that they'd been facing after the construction of the border wall. And that was just heartbreaking. I mean, every different community that we were interviewing and talking to, just hearing how devastated their lives were. The first community that we talked to was the Native community, the Tona O'odham Nation. That is literally, their reservation was cut in half by the border wall. And so it was so frustrating. They told me all about how in the passing of the Real ID Act, I think that was in 2007, there was an extra provision that basically waived, I think it's 36 protections along the border wall. So that's waiving Native treaty rights, that's waiving Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, all of the endangered species protections, I think within 10 miles of the border. So that entire stretch of land on our southern border, there's basically no protections. And for the Native community, that looked like they weren't recognized even anymore. Despite being a nationally recognized tribal community, they were not recognized. Border Patrol would encroach on their land. Their cemeteries were blown up to construct the border wall. Their aquifers were drained. It was sickening. Everything you'd hear from these people was just so ungodly awful. And so that was just one of the communities that I was like, how can I just learn this information and just leave it be? So we then went into a facility where basically people who had been intercepted by ICE were placed, or Border Patrol were placed while they waited for asylum hearing. So basically what I learned is that more context. For those who don't know, the system under the Biden administration of seeking asylum in the United States was extremely complicated, and it made it so many people were denied before they even basically started their process. I think the Biden administration launched an app that was what they had to file for asylum before crossing the border, which only, I want to say less than 1%. It's either 1 or 2%, but I think it's less than 1% of people were actually accepted for asylum in the United States through that app. And that also means that people needed to be able to access a phone, access service, be able to download this app, understand the app, understand what it's asking in order to file for asylum, which the people who are filing for asylum oftentimes do not have those resources readily available. So that was entirely frustrating. So those people, if they wanted to try to get asylum, they would have to cross the border. And a lot of times, I mean, the narrative that you hear in the news now is that people are just crossing the border hoping they're going to get away with it. But everyone that we talked to wanted to get intercepted by Border Patrol. The walk in the desert, it can get insane low and high temperatures. It's miles long. I think it's a 13-mile walk before you hit any kind of city. You're in the desert.
Limited water, too.
Exactly. There's no water. 13 miles these people have to walk after they cross the border. They want to be intercepted by Border Patrol so that they can say they want to file for asylum, because then they're placed in a facility, they get a trial, they get an asylum hearing. If the Border Patrol agents offer that, which it's up to Border Patrol discretion, which is a whole other issue. So we were talking to people in the center who had been intercepted by Border Patrol, who had said that they wanted to seek asylum. They also had to know that that's what they had to say, which is a whole other thing. So we were in there, and it was just talking to those people whose lives were basically hanging in the balance of things that they couldn't control. They had no idea. They were in a new country. They were just, I don't understand how you can see those things and then continue to advocate for policies that just hurt these people. And I think that's where a lot of my issues with all of border policies really come from, is they're not talking to these people and they're not seeing that. And I think that's one of the main things that I really focused on there.
It seems like, for what I'm interpreting from what you're saying, is you're very passionate about uplifting those who are vulnerable, whether it was those who had mental health issues coming out of COVID in your high school, and then that getting stretched over to, first responders or veterans within your community, then going down to the border and seeing the situation down there. It seems like you're very motivated to right the wrongs for those that are vulnerable and need the help the most. And so that seems very, very admirable, too, from my perspective as well, because I can hear it in your voice. You seem very passionate and compassionate towards these issues and these people, very empathetic to put yourself in their position, even though you're born in Minnesota, you never were crossed the border out of necessity. You go willingly down there to see what's going on. It's very inspiring to hear someone like that, especially someone that's around our age, where a lot of the stigma around people our age is they aren't tuned in, they don't care about the issues in the world or in America. So it's good to know that there's individuals out there like yourself who are motivated to right the wrongs within our society. But I'm curious on what sparked that conviction within you to take matters into your own hands. Was that something that you always had within you growing up, or is that something that kind of developed on your own? What motivated you to be the person to take action on certain things and not be the one to follow someone else?
I think it's always been in me to hear, if you hear the stories of these people, I physically can't understand how you couldn't have empathy for these people, how you couldn't want to make a change and want to make things better. I think that's just how I was born. That's how I was raised, is if there's an issue, you fix it. So whether that's mental health, and 90% of people in a public high school saying that they need support and they're stressed out, you're going to try to do something. Or if it's people who had crossed the border and are saying that they need water. Of course, I'm going to go and leave water in the desert. That's what we did for, like, me and a couple of my classmates went out and left water in the desert for people who were crossing the border. And so, like, I think it's just something if you're in a situation where someone tells you, hey, this is what's wrong, I think it should be human decency to do whatever you can to fix it, because I've obviously been very blessed to get different resources than these people, like you said. Mm-hmm. So using the resources I have and the pathways that I know and doing what people are asking. I'm never, like, going to do something that people aren't asking for. So, like, they said we needed water out there. I'm going to leave water. Like, I'm going to do what they're asking, because when you give people a voice, they're going to tell you what they need. And I will never disencourage someone from telling me what they need. I think that's what I'm here to do, I guess. I think that's what I've always known about myself, is if someone tells me what they need, I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure I can give them what they need and amplify those voices and make sure that people are listened to.
Yeah. I know I was just, as we were talking before we started recording, I came from a job fair earlier today, and I talked to a councilwoman for Anoka City Council, and I was just asking her, like, what's some important advice for people interested in, like, running for office someday, whether it's at a very local level or, a national level. And she said, more or less, people just want to be heard. Whether you agree with them or not, they just want someone to be listening to them. And so whether it's, like, super far out their ideas or something very fundamental to, like, their existence as a human being or to their survival, as long as people know someone cares about what they have to say and is making a concerted effort to hear what they have to say, that's just one step in the right direction. So that's cool to just, like, have heard that from someone who's actually in elected office. Then, like yourself, you're someone motivated to make positive change. That's great. After high school, though, you come to you went to, was it USC for a little bit, but then that ended up not working out. So then you transferred over to the U of M, correct? And then now that you're at the U of M, what are you majoring in and minoring in?
Okay, so for the USC thing, Mason, for context, you listeners, Mason worked for our Row the Vote campaign, which I oversaw. So because of that, and Mason does know who I am. Yeah, so I got accepted into USC, and I went and did, like, all of, like, their orientation stuff. I took tours and everything like that, and it was just so expensive. I am a person from a middle-class family, and I cannot afford $100,000 tuition. That is a true thing, and now here I am at the University of Minnesota. More on tuition later, though, if we're going to talk about what we're going to talk about. Yeah.
You have some good experience dealing with that, then, it seems like, from going out to USC.
Yes, and so I do understand how people can be priced out of college educations based off of no fault of their own. They can be the smartest people, but they still just can't afford college education, and I think that's something that is fundamentally wrong, but we are going to talk about that later.
Yes.
So I'll talk about what I do here at the U. I came in CSE. I wanted to be an environmental engineering major, and I always knew that I wanted to be an environmental attorney. That's what I want to do. That's still what I want to do. And so I thought the best avenue to do that initially was to learn about the infrastructure, about, like, where we can improve infrastructure, and that's what I should focus on before being an environmental attorney. After taking physics, Calc 2, and Chem in a 5-credit Spanish class all in the same semester, I was like, I don't think I should be doing this, because I'm not actually learning about, like, the human implications of climate change or anything like that. So I transferred into CFANS, College of Food, Natural Resource Science, Agriculture and Natural Resource Science. And I am an environmental sciences policy and management major on the policy planning, law, and society track. It's, like, the longest major at the university, I think. I absolutely love it, because now I get to analyze climate change effects in more of a social justice aspect and really focusing in on environmental injustices. And that's what I want to learn about, and that's what motivates me to become an environmental attorney. And so being able to do that is what I love, and I absolutely love my major. With that, I'm also a social justice minor and a business law minor. Yeah, that's my education. That's what I do.
So you're busy is what you're saying.
Yeah, yes, I do take a lot of classes, but I absolutely love them. Like, when I tell you, I hated all of my CSE classes, because it was just like, this is awful. I'm just learning things to take a test, and then it just, like, leaves. But everything in CFANS that I'm learning, environmental sciences, policy, and management, is, like, how to look at environmental issues through different lenses. So I took a natural resource management class through a tribal and indigenous studies lens, and that was just it just completely shifted my thinking. And so I'm always being pushed to change the way I'm thinking about issues and look at them through different lenses and different ways of seeing things. And whether that's like the science, the hard science, like ecology classes, or it's through these like community focused classes, I just love everything that I'm learning.
Yeah, because if you want to change climate change, you got to know the science and the interactions within, different communities and how that affects it. So that seems like a good 2-for-1 right there with what your intended goals are once you graduate. On top of being extremely busy academically, what other activities are you a part of on campus as well?
Yeah, so the first thing I joined as a wee baby freshman was the mock trial team. I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, and that's something I still know about myself. And so I just thought no better way to be surrounded by lawyers and learn courtroom skills than to be part of the mock trial team and do mock trials, I guess. So I am currently the president of our Undergraduate Mock Trial Association, and Mason's snapping. I absolutely love mock trial. I love my teammates. We basically travel around doing mock trials. So whether that's I'm an attorney on the defense for a defendant who is being accused of killing their father, which is like going on. That's our case right now. Or last year, it was an art heist, and we were prosecuting someone who was an art heist. Basically, you switch between prosecution and defense every round, and you can either be an attorney or a witness, and I do both because I like acting as well, so that's the witness part.
Yes.
So, yeah, I love mock trial. It just teaches you so much about our rules of evidence, but also how to analyze a case and read things, take notes of key facts, which has been really helpful in my business law minor because I know I'm very, very familiar with courtroom procedures, what legalese means, and just it's really great practice.
Yeah, and you can also educate those who aren't maybe as knowledgeable about the field of law and like what rights they have and what courts can and cannot do to them within like a courtroom. So yeah, it seems very beneficial to what you want to go in once you graduate from the university. On top of that mock trial, you're also part of the undergraduate student government as a, Director of Civic Engagement, correct? So when did you first become interested in USG, as it's called?
Yeah, I started my role as Director of Civic Engagement this past summer. So basically, I got thrown into the deep end. I obviously, as you guys know, this was an election year, so it was so much to navigate at first because I was basically, me and my boss were in charge of running our Row the Vote campaign, which means we had to educate as many voters as possible, register as many voters as possible, and then ultimately bring all of those voters to the polls. And so when you have, what do we have, like 55,000 undergrad students? Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's tens of thousands for sure.
Yeah. And so trying to see how we can best support all of those students, it was so much work over the summer and through the election season. Me and my boss often joke about how much hair we lost, which is honestly true because we were eat, breathing, and sleeping like this election and interacting with students. My first day, like boots on the ground, like interacting with people was our freshman. When we were doing all the freshman events, I got I think 1,000 voters to pledge to vote. And my first day on the job, so I was out in the sun for like, I want to say 8 hours. I don't know if it was actually that long, but I was interacting with, I got 1,000 people to fill out the form. So imagine how many people I was actually interacting with. It was an insane amount of people. And it was just me that day. And so that was insane. And I understood immediately how important it was because every time someone would come up to, not every time, but most of the time when people would come up to the booth, they'd be like, oh my gosh, I was actually so worried about this because I'm an out-of-state student and I didn't know how voting would work. And I was like, I am the exact person you should be talking to because I know exactly how voting works for you.
And you're in the right state too because Minnesota has great election laws. Like it's very easy to vote in this state compared to a lot of other states.
Yeah, and it's a little tricky when people are coming from states that aren't so flexible with election laws. So like we had some students from Texas and they wanted to vote in Texas. And so I was like, you're going to have some hoops to jump through. And so that was hard to explain to people. But it's good that I'm able to educate them on what their options are when they are coming from a situation like that. So that was so awesome. I'm so very, very happy that I got to work on the Row the Vote campaign because I just got to talk to so many students. And it was unbelievably amazing how much support I was given, and how much enthusiasm the student body presented about the election and how much they wanted to be engaged. And I think a lot of times the rhetoric is that young people are unmotivated, they don't want to vote, they're disillusioned, but that's not what I was seeing. And I think if you actually, again, talk to people and give them an opportunity to express what they're feeling and what they need, that's all you have to do is just meet them where they are, right. And they will vote, they will educate themselves because they want to, and it's not just this scary thing, and you can't just assume that young people aren't going to vote because they want to, and they will if they're given the opportunity and given the information.
Yeah, I mean, being one who was also part of that Row the Vote campaign, I mean, that was such a fun activity to be involved in, going to classes. I just remember getting done with German, longboarding over to the office, grabbing all the pledge forms, and longboarding across the bridge to West Bank and just speaking to 100 students, and it's like, I got class in an hour. I got to talk to this class. I mean, it was like controlled chaos, but in a good way, and it was very fun and rewarding too, because you were just you were actively participating in our democracy, and it's especially with young people too, who are statistically not as inclined to vote as other age groups, and to know that you're making a difference. I think, by the end of the campaign, we had 12,000 pledges to vote, and then how many? I mean, a lot of people were registered already before they had pledged, but they were already registered, which was good to see as well. And I know Minnesota's worked on that too. When you register to get your driver's license, you also register to vote as well. So it was cool to see legislation that was passed be implemented, and then the positive effects of that as well. And we got to meet a lot of cool people. I mean, when we had Voter Palooza, Tina Smith, the senator from Minnesota, came. Who's the Frost? Maxwell Frost?
Maxwell Frost. Oh my gosh, I love this man. I'm going to sneak in and talk about him for a second because I think he's absolutely amazing. Through my job at USG, I went to the DNC this summer, and it was for a youth vote fest. And so we were having all of these people come in, and Maxwell Frost just gets on this stage and just takes over and says, every person in here has the ability to make change. And he was just so, he's speaking from his heart because he did swear in a church. And when I saw him
right.
at Voter Palooza, he came up to me. I was like, oh my gosh, I really loved what you said. It really resonated with me when you were talking at at the DNC.
Yes.
And he goes, I swore in a church. And I was like, I know you did. That's why I knew you were talking from your heart. And he's like, it just frustrates me when people don't. And he was so helpful. He was drumming people around on his golf cart for us.
Very enthusiastic.
Dropping a pizza for people. He was awesome.
Yeah, and then we also, on top of that, we had the federal representatives, and then we had Steve Simon came and was throwing the football around with us, the Secretary of State from Minnesota, and I think there's a couple of city council or former mayors. Oh yeah, the mayor came, Jacob Fry came, and it was just great to see elected officials come and hang out with us, and just you get to talk to them one-on-one. And it's really unfortunate that not a lot of other people get to see that side of elected officials. I think they kind of get put up on this pedestal of I wouldn't say they're non-human, or they put what's the saying? They put their pants on one leg at a time, sort of deal. They're not as different to us as we might originally think. So it was cool to just kind of get to communicate and interact with them, and it's just a great experience overall. And I look forward to hopefully being involved in that campaign once the midterms come around, because I'm assuming that'll probably be another thing that happens in 2026.
Absolutely. Check your emails soon, Mason.
Yes.
No, but I actually have two things on what you just said, because you're absolutely right. The first is that historically, young people haven't been the ones to vote, and because of that, policies aren't really aimed towards young people because they're not going to vote for the people that are proposing these policies. So lawmakers don't necessarily feel inclined to make policies attractive for young people. Mm-hmm. And that's a huge problem. And that was one of my really driving that's what gave me energy throughout all of Row the Vote, because obviously I was managing my team of 15 voting captains, which Mason was awesome actually on that. But when I was emailing people letting them know that they'd been selected for their voting captain positions. I think the first email I got back was from Mason, and he goes, "Let's get to work!" Exclamation point.
1 minute after you sent it, but yes, I remember that.
Yeah, so he was very, very enthusiastic. But yeah, that just goes to show that, like, if we do roll out young voices and young voters, then policies are going to become more attractive to them. And so that's some direct impact that we can have. And I think that's something really important for people to understand and know, is that because young people aren't voting and aren't really given the resources to vote, because people kind of just assume that they won't, policies aren't aimed towards helping them, which is a huge problem, especially right now with everything that's going on. We need to be protecting and supporting our young people to make society better. And so that's just something that's motivated me, is just knowing that policies aren't aimed towards young people because young people don't vote. But if we make young people vote, policies will then help them.
Right.
And now on to how awesome our lawmakers are that came to Voterpalooza. I remember sending out emails, and I was feeling really, really down by like how many people were just like, no, we can't come to this event. But then seeing the people who did come and did show up to support us was absolutely amazing. I mean, Jacob Frag gave me, our mayor here in Minneapolis, gave me his personal phone number and said, "Riley, if you ever need anything, let me know. Like, I want to help these young people get to the polls." He's like, if people even need me to drive them in their personal car, like on election day, like I'm here and I want to do that. You give me a call.
Yeah, you'd be like his own personal taxi service, basically.
Exactly.
Wasn't that what he was proposing?
Exactly. Right. And he gave me his phone number, and I mean, that's an amazing thing to do, and it just shows your support so much. And I think that's awesome. Obviously, Steve Simon was there, our Secretary of State, which was awesome to have him there and make him approachable and talk to. But I want to talk about Tina Smith specifically. She's our senator here. And she knew by that point that she wasn't going to run again for her seat, but she still made the effort to come and support young voters.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. Yeah.
I think that just shows to me how much she does care. And I think I thought about that all the time. Like, I left thinking, wow, she is not running again. She's just there to really make sure that we're seen and we're talked to. And I mean, she had really long conversations with a lot of us and with our, like, specifically our voting captains. And she was just asking what we thought of things. And I was so touched after that, because it was just amazing to see. And I mean, we were having some issues with really, really long lines. Because simultaneously, while we were having this more fun, like, meet all of these cool people event, we also were having our pop-up voting location, which is an early polling place for everyone in the city of Minneapolis to come and vote at that pop-up. And we were having some really bad issues with staffing. Like, the lines were really long. I think it took Jocelyn, our boss, like 30 minutes to go through when she voted there. And then seeing how all of our, like, representatives responded to that, like, oh my gosh, I think it was Representative Noor. Yeah, Representative Noor.
State House House
Yeah, he's her House rep for our district here. He was so upset. He was calling the mayor. He was calling everyone at the city to make sure that we got more election staffing. And I just thought that was so awesome. Like, you go, Representative Noor. And yeah. I mean, I've talked to him since, and that's still something that he's really passionate about, to make sure that in all of these upcoming elections that we have enough staff. And I mean, I was just talking to him, I think, last week, and he was so like, because I'm sending letters to obviously the city and the county to try to alleviate that problem right now. That's part of my job. And so I was talking to Representative Noor about it, and he was, if you ever need anything, if you need me to co-sign a letter with you, just let me know. And I just feel so supported by all of our representatives and legislators, and I think people need to know that they're people and that they're there to represent them. And if you have a problem, they will listen to you if they're good, if they are good legislators, which we are so lucky to have. So, yeah, that's my piece on that. I think these people are really approachable if you want to approach them.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like what we're describing is just democracy in action. Like, the elected officials that represent us coming to our location in person, and then they're making positive change when we ask for it. I mean, that's literally what democracy should be to a T, basically. And, yeah, when you talked about representatives not being as open to legislation that would maybe, like, support young people, and how, like, how older people vote more, and, like, their policies are going to be more directed towards older people or people that vote predominantly more than other age groups. It's like, that's what annoys me sometimes when you see people our age who are just so turned off from politics and won't even vote. I'm like, how do you expect change to occur if you aren't going to be the one to exercise your right that you're given to? And so it's just, if we can do a better job, people like you and me who are passionate about this and like effectively communicate that and message it to people, increase those numbers. I mean, sky's the limit, really. Because if you are worried about the direction the country's going for, like climate change or like the national debt and how that's going to be our problem to fix in the coming years, it's like you can go complain on social media, or you can go complain on social media and go vote about it or something like that, or organize people too. You can't just, yell into a void and not do anything about it at the same time. So yeah, it's very inspiring and motivating to get people involved with that. But on top of that, the reason we're having this podcast today, you are running for the student body president coming up here, correct? That'd be the correct title for it, student body president?
Yeah, student body president or president of our undergraduate student government.
Okay, got you. So you and your running mate, Ethan Fiegel, correct, is you were running for student government or student body president, upcoming campus election. What motivated you two to run?
So my big thing is you need to talk to people. I think that's how you can fix issues. I'm really frustrated right now with how our undergraduate student government has been approaching outreach. I can really only recall one outreach event that we've thrown that was specifically to attract students into the office to just come and talk to us, the people who are supposed to advocate for them. And then obviously I held, through Row the Vote, I was having so many outreach events a week. We were tabling, we were interacting with students. One of the main questions that we were asking on our voter pledge form was, why are you voting in this election? So students were telling us all about the issues that they were experiencing, and they put them on this form, and they'd still also just talk to us about them. And that's how you understand what issues are actually affecting the student bodies. That's how you represent people, as you talk to them about the issues that they're passionate about. And that's not been happening in our student government, and I want to make sure that that's not even a thought, is that we are actively engaging with students constantly to make sure that we're representing them well, because it's our job as undergraduate student government to represent students, whether it's in meetings with administration or our local representatives. It's our job to represent students, and I am so frustrated that we haven't been interacting with students. I don't understand. I simply do not understand how we can represent students effectively if we're not talking to students. Mm-hmm. And so I completely want to change that, and I want to, our first goal is to have monthly outreach events. We're going to invite people into our office. We're going to go to St. Paul campus. My major's housed on St. Paul campus. I serve on our undergraduate student board for CFANS, and there's never been a student body president from St. Paul campus. Not everyone in USG is policy or is poli-sci majors, but I think I'm the only staff member that's major is housed in St. Paul campus. And I don't even think that's a thing. I think I am the only staff member at our undergraduate student government whose major is housed in St. Paul campus, which seems so crazy to me. It's a huge group of our students that have just not been represented by our undergraduate student government, and that's extremely frustrating to me. So we're going to have events on St. Paul campus, on Minneapolis and West Bank, and making sure that we're actively putting ourselves in front of students, that we're too approachable. I mean, yesterday I was just out street interviewing students, asking them what their problems were on campus, and that's just not a crazy thought for me. I'm going to do it for the rest of my campaign, and I've been doing it for the last week. And I've just been interacting with students and listening to students' problems. And these are problems that we're not talking about in our USG spaces because no one knows there's a problem because no one's talking to students. Right. And so I've learned so much about what is actually going on in students' lives just in the past couple weeks that I've been doing these street interviews with students. And I think it's necessary. I think we need to be talking to these students and just making that our feedback loop. That's what we are there to do, and just constantly reminding people of, you're in this position because you want to represent students. And so in order to represent students, you actually need to talk to students, which hasn't been happening. That's my biggest frustration. Obviously, there are policy issues that I'm passionate about, and I'm assuming we're going to talk about those next.
No, absolutely.
But the primary reason I am running for student body president is because I want to talk to students so I can adequately advocate for them.
Yeah. I mean, that's all very important things. It's kind of what we're talking about the federal or state elected officials. Just communicating with them is so important now, and like the power you can have in just making your voices heard. I mean, you're seeing in like the federal level right now with all these town halls that are happening for like Congress people, and people are, upset about the direction the country is going. Some people are, and they go to town halls, make their voices heard, and that can really have effective change. And that can be felt either at the federal level or at the university local level, like what you're talking about right now. Communication is key. So I think, that seems like a great way to run a campaign, to be motivated to run a campaign, motivated to serve as a student body president. But for those who don't know what the student body president does, could you just give a summary of like some of the roles that you would do if you were elected?
Yeah, so I would basically oversee and kind of create the initiatives that would be needed for I'm sorry, I'm getting a phone call from one of my staff members. Okay, that's so funny.
On the clock all the time.
On the clock all the time. Actually, can I take this? Do you care?
No, yeah, that's fine. Let me pause it quick.
Yeah.
We'll be right back. And we are back. So we were talking about functions of the student body president. Please continue.
Yeah, so basically my job will be kind of to frame all of our policy goals throughout the year, working with our executive board and working with all of our different groups within USG. So I feel like students oftentimes don't really know everything that we do at USG, and so we have a ton of different facets to us. I currently work on our government and legislative affairs team. So that's with our local, state, and federal directors who work with their respective legislations and things like that. And then I work as our Director of Civic Engagement, so engaging students with all of those levels of government and also running Row the Vote campaign. But there is so much more to USG than even just like the staff side of it. So we have our forum, and so we have committee directors, we have at-large representatives, we have senators, we have all of these different groups of people who are coming, and those groups of people can vote on things on behalf of students. And so basically there's just so many different facets to USG. And I would be overseeing all of those and framing all of our objectives and goals through our main policy pillars as well, and emphasizing those, and then giving committees kind of frames to work with, but ultimately trusting all those committee directors as they deserve our trust, as just really trusting our staff to make sure that they I feel like they're the most knowledgeable in what they do. So trusting them, but also working towards things that are benefiting students the most. So we're really there to advocate for students, whether it's in meetings with legislators or administration. We're here advocating for students. I mean, USG has made, we made Go for a Chauffeur. We are right now advocating for a tuition freeze. That's what's taking up a lot of my time. And USG right now is advocating for that tuition freeze to make sure that we are able to lock in our tuition, whether it's like we're getting Narcan across campus through our basic needs committee. Like there's just so much that USG does, and all of that would be kind of under my oversight, but there are so many structures in place, so it's also the directors of each of those different departments. But I would ultimately get to shape the goals of USG as an entity.
Yeah, so basically you're like provide the overall leadership for USG, and you're like a voice for the students, but then also you delegate responsibilities to other members within the staff or coordinate with the senators, whatever, too. So it's a lot, but it seems like fun too at the same time.
It's a lot, and it's awesome. And it's awesome because there's so many amazing and knowledgeable people who just can just do so much. Like Mason knows Jocelyn Bloss. Like she is currently the Director of Government and Legislative Affairs, so my job is under her. And the way she just works and operates, she just knows everything. Like I always tell people, if I am in a forest and there's a fork in the road and we're all lost and 500 people are going left and Jocelyn's going right, I'm going right. Like, she knows everything, and I just think that she had the most amazing vision for what our government and legislative affairs team needed to do this year, especially like all the things going on at the national level right now is what's really been taking up a ton of time. And also our tuition freeze campaign, because the university is aiming to increase tuition again. So kind of combating that for students. And there's just so many people. There's not so many people like her, but there are people like her who are able to take charge and just advocate for students. So putting that trust into students and picking those people who are able to run these different facets of USG is also just something that I am so happy and prepared to do, is because there's just so many people who are so great at their jobs, and making sure that they're still able to do whatever it is that they do in their level of expertise is something that I'm so excited to be able to do, and just trust people to do their things while also being the ultimate voice for students and giving them kind of guidelines on things that are really pressing for students right now.
Yeah, absolutely. To hype up Jocelyn some more, I mean, she's the type of person that she is not afraid to speak truth to power as well. She's very confident in what she believes in, and she's not afraid to speak her mind on certain things. I remember when we went out to the conference out in Maryland in November, you, me, Will, who we just were talking to as we hopped off here, and Jocelyn and Alexander. But we were in a conference in a great hall of like 300 people, and they were having people speak, and Jocelyn's like, "Oh, I raise my hand. I'll speak to everyone here on the first day. Doesn't know anyone." So yeah, Jocelyn's the best, and she's got to learned a lot from her too, I would assume, because she's graduating this year, and you're a sophomore as well, right? So you learned a lot from her as well.
Absolutely. I think Jocelyn, there are a few people in my life that I would not be like how I am without, and I think Jocelyn is very quickly turning into one of those people. We spent so long working on the Row the Vote campaign, and just constantly having her frame things as we're doing this to help students, and like she always knew exactly what to say and exactly what to do whenever we found ourselves in a pickle, which we always did, because like there's just so many moving parts all the time, managing like 20 staff, like 200 volunteers we had to manage and make schedules for, and go into over 1,000 classrooms and just everything like that. And then on top of that, we're also students doing our jobs. Like Jocelyn had 2 majors, exactly. But okay, to hype up Jocelyn one more time, last week we were in a meeting with Rebecca Cunningham, the president of the University of Minnesota, and it was just me and Jocelyn talking to her, and she came up to me initially, and she like gave me like a high five, and she just thanked me for being there.
This is Rebecca
Cunningham, the president of the University of Minnesota. Yeah.
Oh, like the actual president.
The actual president, not just the student body president. Not just the student body president. Our student body president currently is awesome also. But no, this is the president of all of the University of Minnesota, so all of our campuses. She is in charge. And historically, she has not talked to students. That's just how she is. Like, she's required to meet with our student government once a semester. And
it's only just once a semester?
Once a semester.
Wow.
And last semester, it was a 15-minute meeting. She took a 5-minute phone call in the middle of it, and it was all on Zoom. And so they were just sitting there and not talking to her. She always talks about how much she engages with students. She had a 10-minute conversation with our student government for an entire semester. And these are the people who their jobs are to, and they're voted to represent students, and you're not talking to the people who are representing students, and that's so incredibly frustrating. And of course, if we're in a conversation with me, Jocelyn Bloss, and Rebecca Cunningham, Jocelyn's going to tell her all of that.
Yep.
And she just kept going. And there was something really frustrating that happened a couple weeks ago. I was meeting with our government relations team, talking about how to make that polling place that we were talking about earlier, the early pop-up voting place, that making that line a lot shorter. So we were trying to get more staff. And so I was advocating through, technically our official channel is to go through our University of Minnesota government relations team. Historically, that's not what we do because it's extremely ineffective. And so we go through our legislators who are so supportive and awesome, and we talk to the city directly because these are the people who will be providing us these additional staff. Technically, the official channel is our government relations team. So, I was in a meeting 2 weeks ago, and they were talking about potentially moving our early pop-up site to Kaufman, and basically saying that all of the people at Row the Vote had been advocating for that. Mind you, me and Jocelyn ran Row the Vote.
Right.
And I texted Jocelyn immediately. I was like, did you talk to our government relations team about how you, how you want Kaufman to be our early pop-up site? I didn't think that was a problem. She goes, no, I've not talked to her ever. And which is another problem, is they don't talk to us. And so I was like, as someone who led Row the Vote, our problem isn't the location of Wiseman being our early pop-up voting location. It's just that the line is so incredibly long because we don't have the staff working like the thing. That's our problem. Mm-hmm. And she was like, oh, that's so interesting. That's not what I heard. And I was like, who did you talk to? Like, who did you talk to? It wasn't the people who you should have been talking to. It wasn't students, probably. It was, I have no idea who she talked to. And she was throwing around the fact that she had talked to students. She had talked to the organizers of Row the Vote. No, she didn't. And so this is just a constant problem that we have. And so Jocelyn was bringing that up. And then Rebecca Cunningham's response was, well, you need to go through the proper channels and you need to talk to the government relations team, who we had just explained was misquoting us and wasn't talking to us and doesn't interact with us. And that's not saying that the government relations team is bad by any means. It's just there's so much going on all the time, and it's really hard for them to keep up with everything that we're doing because there's, again, USG does so much. And so some levels of our government relations team, like our national, state, and local directors of GovRel and their equivalents are really great. It's just there's not enough interaction with students, and that's what it always comes down to. And so that's what Jocelyn was letting Rebecca Cunningham know last week, and she really laid into her. And I was just sitting there, and I was just like, wow. Jocelyn is so awesome. And I think that often, like I text, like Jocelyn is just so awesome. She is so helpful, like on my campaign, and just, she's also my boss at USG right now. And so just like everything that I have going on at USG and my campaign, like I don't know what I would do without her. Literally, she's changed my life. And I totally believe that it's just because of how freaking awesome she is. And yeah, that's my piece on how Jocelyn Blass. Oh my gosh, no, because I often call her my mother. And so I was like, oh my God, my mother like told me to do this. Like just to like our work coworkers. But I was explaining her to someone, I don't even know who I was talking to, but I was like, imagine it's a pouring rainstorm. Like everywhere is a pouring rainstorm. And our government relations team has an umbrella. Mm-hmm. Jocelyn's holding that umbrella. Yeah, that's exactly how my job works, is that Jocelyn protects us, guides us, shows us how to do everything. This is turning into how awesome Jocelyn Blass is, but if I die on that hill, I will die on that hill because
important to note, she's the future Attorney General of the United States, right?
Probably. I mean,
you heard it here first, right?
No, I think she's so awesome. She's just so awesome.
Yes, no, that's great. And I was just thinking as you're talking about that story of Rebecca Cunningham telling you to go through the proper channels, but then you were getting misquoted. It's like a game of telephone. You know, the more people you got to go through, the more likely it is that original message gets, manipulated, whether intentionally or unintentionally, and then by the time it gets to the intended audience, it's completely different from where it started. So it's good to be able to talk face-to-face, and I'm shocked that they're only required to meet with student body or the student government once a semester. That's more than once a month. That's more than just, it's like 3 months, 4 months in a semester, and you only meet one time. Think of how much twice a year, how much can change within that time period too.
Twice a year for 15 minutes each, and she took a 5-minute phone call. So really 20 minutes every year is what these people are getting. And that is what we're getting. And I think that's why we're having so many problems, because if I don't understand, again, going back to the what I was talking about when I was talking about immigration, is I don't understand how you can make policies that affect people without talking to people. Right. And if you had talked to people, you wouldn't make those policies. And I firmly believe that no human could make those policies. Like, talking about the border again, I firmly believe that no person who has seen what I've seen and who has talked to the people that I've talked to could morally make those decisions, because I don't understand that. I completely don't understand that. And I think that's a similar case with Rebecca Cunningham. Is I don't think she's talking to students, and I don't think that if she had been, our policies would be how they are with raising tuition and everything else that's been going on, especially with their initial response to all of this stuff going on with DEI. I don't think initial responses would have been how they were if she had actually been talking to students, and if her administration and the regents had actually been talking to students, because there's just so much fear going on, and people are poor. We cannot afford tuition to keep increasing, and it's just, there's frustrations definitely with our administration that they're just not talking to students, and I think that's what we really need to push them. That's, again, one of my goals as student body president is to push our regents and push our administration to make sure they are talking to us. That's something I'm extremely, extremely passionate about, and I'm not afraid. I've been listening to Jocelyn,
Right.
and I am not afraid to tell them point blank, you need to be talking to students and holding them accountable. I will do whatever I can to make sure that they are listening to students, and that's a promise I'll make. That usually politicians or people running for offices won't make promises because they just can't, but I will promise I will do everything in my power to make sure that the university, our regents, our presidential administration listens to students and listens to our undergraduate student government so that they can actually make changes that are going to help students, because that's not what's going on right now, and it's so incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, before you can work out this promise, one has to get elected first. And to get elected, you talk about the 4 pillars that you've alluded to previously in this conversation for your campaign, and these 4 pillars include student health and well-being, college affordability, campus safety, and sustainability and environmental policies. So I think it'd be good to go through all 4 of these one at a time, beginning first with student health and well-being. So what are your positions and proposals when it comes to student health and well-being?
Absolutely. And just before we go into all these policies, I want to shout out all of my policy advisors and all of the people who worked on my policy team, because, again, I'm someone who trusts people, and I'm trusting what people tell me. And so I trust my policy advisors so immensely, and these are people who I completely trust to make these policies. So my policy team is led by Andrew Larson, who's our former Speaker of Forum for USG, and he oversees his team. So I'll just shout out all of them right now. So student health and well-being is led by Michaela Miller, who is our former Chief of Staff at USG, who does amazing work. College affordability is run by Will, who we were just on the phone with.
He politely interrupted this conversation.
No, because he's trying to organize testifiers. I'm testifying for a bill that's going on Monday, and so Will is organizing that because he currently works at the Capitol, and he does great work there. And so he is our college affordability advisor. Campus safety is Jacob Richter, who's currently the chair of the Campus Safety Committee. And sustainability and environmental policy is Bryn. She is awesome. She is currently on our environmental accountability committee, and she was our former chief of staff as well. She's just awesome. And I am so very, very happy that these are our pillars and that we have such knowledgeable people overseeing these things, because there's so much research that goes into making these pillars. I'll just say off the bat is there's such in-depth research on what the problem is, what the university is doing, what we can hold the university accountable to doing, and what we can add to make these pillars. And these people are just so knowledgeable in everything that they did, and I am so grateful for them. And so now I can go into the pillars if you'd like.
Yes, there you go. Snaps all around for them.
Yeah, snaps all around, because they're so awesome and they do so much amazing work. Okay, student health and well-being. I am just beyond passionate about this. I think just touching back on when we were talking about all the mental health things that were going on in my high school, imagine that amplified here. And so my first goal for student health and well-being is actually to expand our mental health resources. So that's through increasing funding for on-campus mental health counseling to reduce wait times. It's really bad. I mean, I was in an undergraduate advisory board this morning, and someone was sharing how she's a CA, and one of her freshmen came to her and said that she wanted to access our long-term counseling services through Boynton, which are free for all students, if you didn't know, which is another problem, is that no one knows what is going on. And so basically there was one spot left available, and it was at 7 a.m. on Wednesday mornings, and this girl had class.
Right.
Boynton is currently from 8 to 4:30. That's when students have class. And so expecting mental health crises to happen during those hours and expecting students to be able to go to continual therapy during those hours is something we can't ask of students and we can't expect. And so making sure our mental health resources reflect student needs is something that I am beyond passionate about. And so that includes other goals within our expanding mental health resources, is expanding peer support and student-led mental health initiatives, because we've lived weird lives. This generation has been through some things like COVID, everything going on. Again, with diversity, equity, inclusion at the national level and immigration, there's so much fear going on, and our mental health professionals didn't experience the same things at the same ages that we did.
Mm-hmm.
And so really partnering people who are going through experiencing similar things is an invaluable resource that we're not utilizing here. And so making sure that people can talk to people who understand what they're going through is something that we're really passionate about making happen for people, because I just think that that's a great resource that everyone should be able to have. And then finally, I think most importantly is strengthening our outreach efforts so students are more aware of available resources, because truthfully, like, I'm not even sure of all the resources. Okay, that's not true. I've done extensive research, and I do know basically everything that we offer here at the University of Minnesota, and there's some great things, but it all falls on the outreach. And I was in a meeting about this morning with some representatives from Boynton, and all of our other mental health OSA stuff, OSA, all of their stuff. And they were asking for student feedback, which is first amazing. I'm always applauding people who are going out and requesting student feedback, and that's what they were doing today. They were put in front of our undergraduate advisory board, which I'm on with one of our former presidents, Sarah Davis, who I also absolutely love. Shout out Sarah Davis. And we were basically giving them feedback on ways that they can improve those outreach efforts. And so I think that's the first step, is engaging with them and helping them shape their outreach efforts, because there are so many great resources that they have. It's just that students don't know about them. And it's oftentimes falling on faculty to include all these resources in their syllabuses or syllabi that people just are not reading. And so making sure it's more than just a couple lines in a syllabus, and making meaningful outreach. So that's our expanding mental health resources goal under student health and well-being, but student health and well-being. And then we also have two more main focuses, which are improving access to reproductive care and combating food insecurity. I can go into both of those.
Yeah, before you do, I was just going to say something. For myself personally, like when you talk about anxious times and all that, like for myself, I started going to Boynton the other day, or it was like a couple weeks ago, to schedule a counseling appointment, because this is for myself. I was like, I'm feeling a little bit more anxious than usual. I'm going to go to them. And I've had great interactions with Boynton, but like you said, the wait time, they're like, okay, you can have this counseling appointment, but you have to wait a month. I'm like, okay, I mean, for me personally, it's not like dire where I don't want to wait a month, but I could if I had to. But imagine someone who's having, like you said, a crisis moment, and they like need help in like as soon as possible. That's just not sustainable. I guess the alternative that they provide is like there's PhD students that can provide counseling for students as well. And I think you kind of alluded to that, where like there's students helping students sort of deal. And so that's been really good so far to have been able to do that and to know that's out there too. And it's just like, for people who have not gone to therapy ever in their lives, or are like skeptical to go into, or feel like shame, like it's actually just unbelievable the like amount of good that can come out of a therapy session. And especially I feel like, I mean, there's probably stigma for both genders, but especially for like men or guys, like there's just like I'm fine, whatever. It's like, if you're not fine, like the environment around that has gotten so much better in the last 5-10 years. Like if I would have been at this stage maybe like 20 years ago, I probably would not even go out and ask for help. But people are just so good at, making people feel comfortable to like let people know they're not okay, and then it's okay to not be okay. And then like the U has these resources, but they're in such high demand that there's just not the availability. So to make that more available for people, and to not, like you said, like not make it available necessarily when they're going to class, because that's just not realistic too. But for anyone who's out there and doesn't think like, or feels shame about therapy, just like 100% endorse that it's such a good thing for people to do. So that's great that you guys are prioritizing that. But to go on to the other things you talked about was food insecurity, and then
access to reproductive care.
There you go, yes.
Yeah, so I can talk about reproductive care first. So currently there's, again, so much fear. I mean, with all of the abortion bans that are going on at the national level, just knowing that we have students back is the primary message I want to get out there, is that I am a woman and I understand these issues, and I am also fearful, but I have every person's back out there. And I think that any person who can be pregnant needs to know how we're supporting them. And so pushing that information out is primary. So to do that, we're going to partner with Boynton to provide free condoms, low-cost birth control, and emergency contraceptives on campus, having them basically everywhere, vending machines in high-traffic student areas, just everywhere, making sure that these resources are available for students. We're also going to advocate for the university to subsidize the cost of long-term contraceptive options for students, because that's something that hasn't been happening. And we're also going to ensure that LGBTQ plus students with disabilities, and students of all gender identities have access to reproductive health care that meets their needs, because what meets the needs of one person does not meet the need of another person. And so making sure that everyone is supported is something that is just so crucial. That's the heart of everything, is making sure that every student has what they need to be good, to make sure that everyone is good. And so working with all of these different students, hearing their feedback of what's not working. Again, we're going to have these constant feedback loops, these outreach events, and making sure that we are focused on making sure we're hearing everyone's voices and their problems and their frustrations so that we can work to address those. These are just the things that we know right now that we need to focus on, but as we get more feedback, we are going to be committed to including that feedback in future changes to whatever, and making sure we're advocating for things that whatever students are needing. Yes. So that's what we're planning to do to access reproductive care.
Great. Yeah, that's all great things to prioritize. Do you guys have plans to how you were going to implement these proposals? Because it's one thing to say them, it's another thing to implement them.
Yeah, so actually really, really excited about this. So basically right now this year, our Basic Needs Committee has rolled out our Narcan dispensers on campus. So it'll be a fairly similar situation with our condoms and birth control and emergency contraceptives. So it'll be a very similar process, and we feel confident that we're able to roll that out. But then also when we're advocating for, at the university level, to subsidize the cost of long-term contraceptive options, that's going to be more of the advocating. So that's where we're going to be really focusing on the people who are working on this and leading this to advocate for those, because it's just so important. And so making sure that the university understands that, and that's the student voice coming through, is that these are things that we need as needs as students for our health and well-being, is this is what we need. So advocating for that is how we are going to make that one happen. And then ensuring that LGBTQ plus students and students with disabilities and students of all gender identities have access to this reproductive health care is essential and important, and we are committed to doing that through the above rollout techniques of making sure that we have those free condoms and contraceptives everywhere, but then also making sure that Boynton is advertising the things that they're doing for all of these students. And if there is ever a time that these students don't feel supported, making sure that they not only feel comfortable, but they will come to us and talk to us about these issues that they're experiencing. Because currently, under our current plans for our partnership with Boynton, they're going to be covered. We have these students' backs. We're making sure that we have individual care options for these students that's available, accessible, and that everyone can get. That's our current plan, is to make sure that's what we're focused on working with Boynton. But if there is something that isn't being seen in reality, if something is not actually being done how we've said it would be done, making sure that those students feel comfortable talking to us so that we can actually take action and change what we've done with Boynton to include all of those students. So initial partnership will have all of these things. We feel confident we can do it because we've done it with similar things. Not comparing condoms and things to Narcan, but it's a similar rollout technique. Right. And so making sure that once we do that all of these voices do feel accounted for is something that we are going to take priority over, is making sure that everyone feels included in that.
Yeah, that's great. That is great. Next thing you have on your list too is college affordability. So what's your positions and proposals for college affordability?
Really quick though, on student health and well-being, we do have our third priority is combating food insecurity.
Oh yeah, sorry, forgot about that.
You're so fine, Mason. There's so much going on.
Yes.
There's so much. Basically, to combat food insecurity on campus, we're gonna expand on-campus food pantries, ensuring that they're well stocked. So currently, there's hours, certain days of week that these pantries are open on campus, we're going to make them full time. That's going to be one of our main priorities, is to make sure that people have food, that basic needs are being met. So many of like our Big Ten universities have fully stocked full-time food pantries.
Mm-hmm.
We're falling behind here. We need to make this a priority. We need to make sure that students' basic needs are being met. We're also going to work towards making a grocery store on campus, an affordable grocery store on campus. Yeah, I said that.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, guys, we're going to fight for a grocery store. Sing that, say that from the rooftops. So, yeah, we're making a grocery store happen. We are committed to this so that students have easy access to nutritious food, because that's something that we're not seeing, and that is a basic need of students, is we need food. And it also plays into college affordability really well, which we're going to talk about next, but making sure students aren't priced out of basic needs is so incredibly important, and that's what we're going to focus on. And so then we're also going to partner with local organizations to make sure that we are bringing affordable meal options to campus, whether that's working with our student farms and CFANs, or bringing in more like food truck type things, or farmers markets, or anything like that, where we're able to bring fresh, clean, healthy food options at an affordable price to students, is something we're committed to. And so that looks like a grocery store, that looks like expanding Nutritious You, our food pantry, and just expanding all of these efforts. That's going to be a really important role for us. And I think not only to keep up with other Big Ten universities, but meet the bare minimum needs of students. Right. These things need to happen. And so we're incredibly committed to making sure that they do.
Yeah, the idea for a grocery store is great in so many levels, because a hungry brain is not a learning brain. So if you're paying all this money to go to this university and you're hungry, then you're going to have a tough time focusing in class. And I know my mom, who's a elementary teacher, she talks about that. Like, if kids are hungry, I mean, that's like evolutionary. You're going to, like, development in humans, like, you're going to focus on that need over anything else that's really going on around you, because it's like, I need calories. And your brain uses, I think, 20% of the calories you intake too. So if you're, you know, in a class that's very draining mentally because of like all the information you're taking on, your brain's just going to be working that much harder, using all that extra calories. So that's my limited knowledge when it comes to science right there. I don't even know if you call it knowledge, but
that was 20% of his daily calories right there, everyone.
Yeah, exactly. You got to Google it. It's true. But, and then also a campus grocery store that provides job opportunities for people on campus as well to do that. I mean, I live in Dinkytown right now, and they have the Target there, which is good to have, but it's like it's limited compared to all the other, like if you have a Costco or a Cubs Food or another Target that's like off campus, or not the Dinkytown one. But obviously I know, like, we're very fortunate in like America to have like the resources that we have, but we can do better, you know. So that's a good idea with the college grocery store. Next up, you have, like we mentioned, college affordability.
Yeah. So this looks like a ton of different things. I'll talk about each one of these a little more in depth, but it comes down to fighting tuition increases, promoting financial aid transparency, expanding on-campus job opportunities, like Mason was just talking about, combating raising housing costs, and continuing to advocate for at the state legislature. That's so key. So I'll just go through all of those pretty quickly.
Go for it.
Fighting tuition increases. Right now, that's the main brunt of my job, is leading our tuition freeze campaign currently. Basically what happened last year is, for those of you who don't know how our budgets and things go for the university, the state controls a good portion of our budget. I want to say it's something like, I think it's around 20% is state funded, because we're a public university. So basically what happened last year was the university came in, they said, hey, state legislature, I need X amount of money, otherwise we're going to have to raise tuition. State gave them more than what they wanted. They still raised tuition by like 10%.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And so making sure that that doesn't happen, that the state legislator is holding the university accountable and saying that if we're giving you this money, it's with the promise that you're not raising tuition costs, because we can't be pricing students out of college. So that looks like pushing the state legislator to hold the university accountable, but also our university leadership accountable. So like we're saying, making sure we are having those direct conversations with our president, Rebecca Cunningham, and all of the regents, making sure we're having that conversation and making sure they're listening to us. our priority there. I think that's so key. And then for promoting financial aid transparency, right now, there's none, basically. It's like you're looking at your financial aid packages and you're like, what is my money going to? What am I getting? Like, it's just so confusing. So we're going to work towards aid transparency
Yes,
legislature at the state legislature. We're going to advocate for automatic renewal of need-based aid, and we're going to expand financial literacy programs to help students navigate loans, grants, scholarships, everything. So I think that comes into also the equity part is even if you don't know how to navigate loans or anything like that, if we're not provided that education, you're still able to understand how to manage your money. And it's just so important. And then we're going to expand on-campus job opportunities. Like Mason said, like we have very little here, and currently we're just over $15 for minimum wage on campus, and that actually was advocated for and received from the university's or undergraduate student government's previous Fight for 15 campaign.
Mm-hmm.
So we were actually the ones who raised the minimum wage on campus in the first place. So we're going to fight to increase the number of well-paying student jobs and also how much people are getting like as wages for those jobs. And then we're also going to push for greater flexibility in work-study programs because that's another problem that students have been experiencing. And then for rising housing costs, I think basically everyone who has an apartment on campus knows how expensive it is. And there's just so much going on right now. There's like rent algorithms that are going on, and it's really bad. And so we're going to work with local policymakers to prevent rent hikes in student housing areas.
Right.
Because, again, last week I was at the Capitol. I was talking to, I think it was Representative Norrigan. I don't know. I guess I just talked to him a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about rising housing costs. And he's committed to helping us in whatever we need. And so I know that I have that support, and I know that I have a channel to do that. I just need to be put in the position where I'm able to effectively advocate on behalf of all students.
Right.
And then finally is continuing advocacy at the state legislature. I mean, that's where all of our money things really come from. And I am very well versed in advocating at the state legislature. That phone call was about just earlier. Is I'm testifying again on Monday for suicide prevention infrastructure on the Washington Avenue Bridge. Actually, is what Monday is about for me. But basically, what it's going to look like at the state legislature for college affordability is protecting the North Star Promise program, because currently that's so important. It's currently granting any student in Minnesota whose family makes under $80,000 free college, and that is so awesome. Like it makes me tingle every time I think about it. It's just like you're changing people's lives, and it's not just the people who get, I think this is the rhetoric that needs to go out there to everyone. It's not just the people who are receiving the scholarship or receiving the grant from the North Star Promise. It's the people who are in the classes with those people. Mm-hmm. You learn so much from people whose voices are different than yours and experiences are different than yours, and the lens that they approach class is different than yours. This program just offers every student at the University of Minnesota so much more, and I will do whatever I can to protect that because it's truly amazing.
Yeah, and not to interrupt you, but anyone who wants to know more about that program, the previous guest on the podcast, Mike Dean is like the founder of the North Star Promise Act, or at least like very important to its passing, and he does a good job explaining in more detail like the ins and outs of it and how it works. But yeah, it's very like it's been well received for the people that have used it so far, and there's still work to be done, but it's like empirically proven that like enrollment is going up, and that is very beneficial for the state and for the people that are enrolled in college and the colleges in general. So yeah, it's a great program. So that's good that you guys are prioritizing that as well.
Yeah, and I work really closely with Mike D, and I think Mason knows this during Pro the Vote and everything like that. I mean, we've gone to DC with him. I work with Mike very closely, and I have learned so much about the importance of this program through talking with both Mike and Will Luther, actually our college affordability policy advisor. He knows a ton of people from like his hometown that have the promise and like the grant money, and it's just hearing their stories is so inspirational of how much good they're doing with this. And
right.
every time I hear something, it's just like, wow, this is so awesome. So we're going to fight as hard as we can to protect that. And I think we're in a good place to do that, which is awesome. I mean, right now, sadly, it's being pushed. I think it's going to be on the House floor next Tuesday, I think, is sadly, it is going to be removing all undocumented people from qualification from the promise. So really hope that does not, I hope that bill does not pass, because that's just, I don't know. Again, it's sickening to think about how dehumanizing policies have been in regards to immigration recently. And I think, yeah, it just does not only those students who are getting their money revoked, but also all of the students in classes with those students. There's just so much harm that would be done if that money did get taken away from those students. And I hope very much that bill does not pass, so that those students are able to maintain their North Star promise. So that was just an aside. So not only are we going to advocate for the North Star promise, but also legislation requiring universities to refund unused meal dollars, or so all of our meal plan dollars at the end of a semester expire, and so you cannot use them. So we're trying to either see if we can make them ensure that they roll over. This is actually being heard in our state legislature in the coming weeks too, but it'll be a continual thing also. So make sure that this actually happens next year. And so we're going to be working very, very closely with that. And as we are currently right now, again, Will Luther is at the Capitol basically every day listening to these hearings and learning about this. And so we're really, really hopeful to be able to ensure that our money does get rolled over, because I think every student knows that they either have to spend it or lose it, which sucks. And I think that's also an equity thing, is you can't be taking people's money away from them. And I think making sure that we make sure that doesn't happen. And so then there's a couple other few keynote things that we're going to be advocating for at the state legislature, including statewide rent control and tenant protections, financial aid transparency, basically everything that comes up we'll be advocating for, and we currently are. I mean, I was at the House last week at their budget meeting, so at the university budget meeting, which is where Rebecca Cunningham was presenting the university's next budget proposal. So I'm in those conversations. For people who don't know, is I listen to these things, and this is my life, is I do listen to what's going on at the state legislature and the university budgets, and I'm very knowledgeable in this, and my staff is very, very knowledgeable in this. So I do feel I am the best suited candidate to advocate for college affordability, because I understand these issues very, very clearly, and I have the people behind me who understand them even more clearly than I do. And I have Mike Dean chirping in my ear every minute. I can't get away from that. No, again, like I said, when we were talking about, there are very few people in my life, if they went right.
Yeah.
When the
group goes
I'd follow Mike.
Yeah,
I'd follow Mike. He knows
when the group goes right and he goes left, you'd go left with him.
Yes. Mike and Jocelyn so far is who we've decided I would follow.
There you go.
In the forest.
We might have to get Jocelyn on here one of these days too, but she's very busy as well.
She is so busy, and I am so grateful. Jocelyn, if you are listening to this, I love you so much. Thank you so much for helping me so much with my campaign. You're awesome. You're amazing.
But it sounds like you got a lot of the connections already established too, so there's not going to be a lag time. I mean, obviously, the bureaucracy of legislation, all that it has to go through, but it's not like you got to spend time to establish relationships. They've already been established. So if you are elected to this position, you can kind of hit the ground running. And
that's what it really comes down to, is I've really built these relationships with these people who are so knowledgeable. All of my policy advisors are people who eat, breathe, and sleep the things that they're talking about. And I'm in these conversations with our administration. I was interviewing regent candidates through Forum at USG last week, because we have seats open. So I know what's going on, and I think that's something that's really important. And I also know what's going on with students. I'm not one of these people who only lives in the state legislature or in university meetings. I'm also a student on all three campuses here at U of M Twin Cities. My major's housed in St. Paul. I have a minor housed in East Bank and another minor housed in West Bank. I'm everywhere. I interact with students all the time, because I am a student, and I am very engaged with just student life.
Right.
And I want to talk to students, and so I think I'm very well suited to have that duality, is I will talk to you casually on the street with a street interviewing mic, or just in class, and talk to you about your problems in a non-judgmental way, because I I like to think that I'm an approachable person. And so
I would say you are. So
thanks, Mason.
yes.
So just like talking to people in classes, but I'm also suited to talk to our administrators, our government relations teams, people like Mike Dean, who are just external entities that help us secure funding and navigate state legislature. And then also our representatives. I have really good relationships with, again, I have Jacob Fry's phone number. If you ever need to contact the mayor, let me know.
Right.
I talk to Representative Noor pretty frequently. I've talked to him quite a few times. Again, Maxwell Frost, like all of these, even though he's not our legislator, I do know his office pretty well. I know, like, I have connections, people. That seems weird to say, but it's like I feel comfortable talking to these people and advocating for students to them because they feel comfortable talking to students about students. And I think that I'm someone who's well suited to do that.
Yeah, and you have these connections without the title of president or the student body president. So imagine the more connections you could establish if you did have that title to go along with it. Sky's the limit, it seems like, with that.
And I'm just grateful. I am grateful that I've gotten these connections with people, and I don't have that title because they just are engaged with talking to students, and I know who actually is student focused. Like, I know that Representative Noor wants to hear from students. I know that Jacob Fry wants to hear from students because they're talking to a student. Again, I was the Director of Civic Engagement, which is an important thing, especially this year, but that's not the student body president, and I know that those people have students' best interests at heart because I'm not just someone who holds some authority over them. I am just a student who wants to talk to them about issues that I'm facing. And they trust me, and I trust them because they trusted me without this title.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point to make. Another pillar that you have is the campus safety. So what's your guys' positions and policies or proposals for campus safety?
Yeah, I'll make this one kind of short and sweet. There's really two main things that we're focusing on. The first is making sure we're leading with our community. I know so many people who've been scared by previous management techniques and for safety on campus. We're not just going to be throwing police officers everywhere that we see a problem because that hasn't been effective. So we're going to take our data from the extended patrols that have been going on in places like Dinkytown and Stadium Village, and we're seeing how it's been impactful. And we're taking and seeing when it's impactful to have people stationed at different locations, but then also making sure that we're doing that with the community and we're giving the community what they need, because sometimes that just scares people. And that's not okay, and people are incorrectly targeted, and that's also really, really not okay. And so making sure we're taking the data from extended patrols and using that and using community-based feedback to guide those is what we're focused on. And so it's not going to be like, oh, people are scared, let's just throw a ton of police officers in the middle of this to make sure things are less scary. That's not how that works. So we're going to take the data and make sure that we are putting police officers where it's necessary and working with the off-campus safety center. And that's how we're going to do that aspect. But the main other focus that we're going to prioritize is mass threat systems. This is something that the University of Minnesota has historically not done. We have no requirements for mass threat systems. When you're going through your orientation, you don't learn about it. In buildings, there's not, look around this university room that we're in right now. There's no, in case of an evacuation, go here. Nothing like that exists. There's not protocol. There's no protocol for active shooters, bomb threats, fires, floods. There's no protocol for any severe weather, anything like that. And it just puts us in such a vulnerability, and it puts students' lives at risk. When we talk about mass threats, you look at what Michigan State has done since their active shooter on campus, and it's frustrating that we're waiting for something like that to happen here before we take action on it.
Be proactive.
Exactly. We need to be making this infrastructure. We need to make sure that doors can lock from the inside. We need to make sure that people know what to do in cases of mass threats. Put evacuation plans everywhere. And we need to just look into how to protect students from these things, because right now we're unprotected. And that's a really scary thought, but we need to lean into that to make sure that we make this happen, because there's such a vulnerability. Last year there was a bomb threat. There's there's such a vulnerability. There was active shooter threats in Middlebrook Hall a couple years ago, and it's like there's so much fear, and this is a reality, and we need to make sure that we're prepared if this does happen.
Yeah, and especially for students that are our age that have grown up doing lockdown drills in elementary school. I remember doing my first one. My mom was my kindergarten teacher. Doing in her kindergarten class, we had lockdown drills, and you grow up and you see Sandy Hook and Parkland and Uvalde, and it's like these terrible incidences that unfortunately happen a lot more than other countries throughout the world. And like you said, it's better to be proactive and stop it before it happens, or be prepared for it if it does happen, then react once it has happened. And so that seems like a great thing to do as well. I'm curious do you guys have any proposals or ideas to work with the U of M Police Department, maybe increasing relationships with them or anything like that? Because I know for myself, I live in Dinkytown, and sometimes you get some riffraff that's going on down there at night. But I always have had good interactions with the U of M Police Department, but obviously it's just myself, and there's other officers people can interact with. But I'm just curious on if you guys have any plans to increase relationships with the university's police department.
Yeah, I'm really happy you brought this up. I want to preface this by first, I am a woman on this campus, and I carry pepper spray on my keychain. I think it's it's in my backpack right now, but I do carry pepper spray. A couple weeks ago, and maybe even last week, my friend was walking into our apartment building in Stadium Village, and someone pulled a knife out at her.
Really?
At 10 a.m. It was completely light out. They found him. They processed the guy, and he had 2 machetes strapped to his chest. There's scary things that happen on this campus, and it's important that people know about this. And this is our reality, right? My cousin was in a shooting on the light rail. There's things that are happening on this campus, and it's not ignoring those, but making sure that when we are working with the off-campus safety center, which we do have good relationships with, I was at a Engage U town hall, and there was our U of M police chief, and then our off-campus safety center advisor person, and we were talking about all the issues on campus. And so we do have a good relationship with them, and working with them to make sure that we're using their data that's collected is going to be really, really important.
Yeah, that's great too, because just like I said, the job fair I was at earlier today, talking to the Minneapolis police officers, and it's just you had the instances before George Floyd, and then once George Floyd happened, that relationship really got negatively damaged, and it's really hard to regain trust, but it's very easy to lose trust. And so try to reestablish that trust within a community is very important too, especially when there's real and active threats going on around, whether it's on campus. I mean, the light rail literally goes through campus, and there's always can be instances on the light rail or in Stadium Village where you have people that probably have mental health issues that are dangerous to themselves and other people. So I'm happy to hear that you guys are committed to working towards better or keeping good relationships or improving relationships with police officers. So That's great. I guess, did you have anything else you want to say for campus safety? Otherwise, we can focus on the next topic.
No, we can talk about the next one.
Okay, perfect. And this one's near and dear to you as well as the other ones. But what are your positions and proposals for sustainability and environmental policies?
Okay, for those of you who don't know, obviously I'm an environmental sciences policy and management major, but I am very, very passionate about the environment, especially environmental justice. And so making sure that we're making policies that are helping all students, and specifically communities that are more prone to experiencing the backlash of climate change and pollution. So making sure that we are doing this in a way that is beneficial to all people is what we're very, very much focused on. So currently the university has a couple of deadlines for themselves that they've set. So a couple of those currently are directly in eliminating emissions from purchased electricity by 2033, and then directly eliminate carbon emissions from campus energy plants and sources owned by the U by 2045. And then that's all on their goal to increase renewable energy by 2050. So there are several university goals, and that's all in university language. So if it doesn't make sense, that's why.
Right.
And so the university has, that's to say that there is a ton of goals. Again, their big one to be carbon neutral by 2050 is like there's so many goals that the university has set for themselves. So what that means for us is to hold them accountable and make sure that they're actually investing in the infrastructure that will get them there. And for my goals, what that looks like is ensuring that we are first tackling waste, because that's something that the university hasn't been really focusing on, and making sure that all of that dining hall waste and all of the waste across campus is managed effectively and well, so that we're able to reuse the food that's like left over, and making sure that that's going to people who are hungry, and making sure that we are not contributing to waste, and that our waste management practices on campus are sustainable, making sure that we are actually sorting food and making sure that there's waste, that students know what bins to put their food in. Something as simple as that is most of our campus buildings do have the put this in here bins above our trash cans. Expanding that, making sure that people know where their waste is going so that they actually use that, is something that's important.
Yeah, I was gonna jump in there. I know for me, I'm like always trying to be very aware of like what's compostable, what's trash, what's recycling, but then also like you don't really want to like ask people too. Like it's I don't know, I wouldn't say shame, but like you kind of feel dumb. You're like, can I recycle this or not? So expanding those pictures or the list of like things that can be recycled or thrown in the compost or just trash in general, that's a great idea too. Because I think a lot of people would be willing to like actually separate their trash, but some people just don't know what goes where, and they just don't want to ask. Because I know for me, I kind of would feel dumb asking someone. So I might just be on my own there, but I think that's a good idea.
No, Mason, if you ever need to ask, text me. I know.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I know this stuff.
Yes.
Let me know. So combating waste is one of our first goals, and then making sure that we are investing in that sustainable infrastructure, making sure we're encouraging the university to purchase solar panels, because there's going to be a lot of new construction, especially on St. Paul campus in the next coming years, making sure that those buildings are designed to be sustainable. So that's whether it's ventilation systems or insulation within the buildings, and making sure that it's energy efficient, making sure that we have solar panels on the building, because the university has said that they want to increase the amount of clean energy that they're producing. A great way for them to do that is solar panels, and we're going to really push their hands to make sure that that's happening. I mean, a lot of our new construction buildings have had solar panels, which is great, but making sure the university is holding themselves accountable to actually doing that is going to be a big feat, and making sure that they are encouraged to use solar panels. Because this is going to be a side tangent really quick.
No, go for it.
In St. Paul campus, again, I'm the only staff member at USG whose major is housed on St. Paul. So I take this, it's not my job to advocate for St. Paul, but I feel like it's my responsibility to advocate for St. Paul. And I do serve on the CFAN student board. So St. Paul issues are very, very dear to my heart. And so basically what's going on is in the next few years, they're going to be reconstructing our student center and tearing down our only library on St. Paul campus to rebuild it and turn that into the student center. And it's a whole thing. Basically, the problem is that they didn't create the plans in consultation with St. Paul students. They went to the Board of Governors and then the USG Executive Board, none of which had representatives from St. Paul campus on them. And both groups said, we're not going to approve this, go talk to St. Paul students, and they didn't. So making sure that the university from now on is engaged with St. Paul campus when they're making this infrastructure. This is a side infrastructure tangent, but it is also related to sustainability, because on St. Paul campus you have very, very condensed students who are focused on sustainability, because that's sustainability minor is housed over there. Our Institute on Environment is housed over there. Obviously, our environmental sciences policy and management major is housed over there. That's where you're finding students who are very, very passionate about these issues. So making sure that when there are making the infrastructure over there, that they're engaging with the students' needs, who these buildings will be used by, and making sure that they are sustainable when they're constructing them is going to be very, very important. Otherwise, that's going to cause the university so many problems. Making not sustainable infrastructure on St. Paul campus especially it's going to cause some problems. And so making sure that the university understands that, and making sure that they actually take action to create like solar panels and do these things to make sure that students are seeing sustainable infrastructure is going to be really, really important. So that's part of it. And then next thing is phasing out non-electric or hybrid buses and other campus vehicles. So we have our goal of of being carbon neutral by 2050. At the university, just bought a plane. Like that is, you. there's not. It's frustrating to see. That's the word. It's just frustrating because the university is saying that they're doing this many things, but then they're not actually doing the things that will get them to their long-term goals. So phasing out our non-EV and hybrid vehicles and then replacing them with electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles is going to be really, really important. It's just really important. And this is what I know a lot about. And so I can tell you that I was in Germany over winter break, and it was for a study abroad. So I was learning all about community-based environmental policy. That's why I was in Germany. And so we were able to tour these cities that are completely carbon neutral, and seeing what they'd done to incorporate communities in their infrastructure is amazing. They have infrastructure for students. They have infrastructure for everyone that's completely sustainable, and it's just amazing how they handle waste, how they handle their energy production, how they create their energy production from their waste. It's just so cool. And they're able to tour a bus depot that was all EVs. And so seeing how those systems works and how they generate their energy is awesome. And seeing how that their entire public transportation sector can be fueled and by sustainable means is absolutely amazing. And it was just great to see, and it's frustrating to then come back to this campus and see our non-electric buses and see our infrastructure and our heating systems that are not sustainable. And it's frustrating, but it's hopeful because I've seen all of these things work the best they can, and I know people who have created this infrastructure, like our Institute on Environment in St. Paul campus. They work directly with these like German city council people and all of their engineers and everyone in Germany who's created this infrastructure. And I feel very, very strong that I have relationships with all of these people, and I can see how it can be implemented here in Minnesota and fit to meet our needs based off of somewhere it's already worked 110%. They're producing more energy than they're using, which is amazing. And that's just a great way for the university to meet their goals, but also make some money. We can sell our energy that we're producing. If we're producing more free or clean energy, selling that too is something that will improve our revenue and hopefully make us not increase tuition so much.
I was going to say that could kind of come back to the college affordability and reduce tuition then if you're having access amount of money. That's great. I like how you are able to take different ideas from other Big Ten campuses or other states or other nations. I know that's what a lot of lawmakers do. Before they implement something, they look at what a different state has done and see if that works. And whether it was the Michigan State example or going out to Germany and seeing what they've done, taking those ideas, bringing them back. I mean, that's the whole why everyone's all big on diversity. Not necessarily what you initially think of diversity and background, but just diversity of thought and experiences and all that. And it's just the diversity of ideas that you can bring back and implement them. And going out and traveling the country and the world and seeing that and bringing it back, that's great to hear that you have these ideas and you're willing to incorporate them. So that's great. Do you guys have a plan? Are you just kind of working with the legislature to incorporate these things, or do you have to go through the president, like Rebecca Cunningham, to incorporate these things? What's the plan to incorporate them?
Yeah, so it is very dependent on what we're directly talking about and what we're working on, whether it's when we're talking about solar panels and things like that. That's university infrastructure that we'll need to kind of start the ball rolling in USG. So we'll need to work with our environmental accountability committee that we have in USG, and then flag that for our university and then really push their hand to invest in it. And that's how that system works, is that we kind of generate our ideas and then we bring them to the university and say that this is what we need to do. And so where outside pressure comes in is if there's legislation that requires the university to do these things, which right now it's the university's goals that are kind of fueling these things. It's a lot more complicated than that, actually, but it's the university's goals. They've said that they're going to do this. And so calling them out and saying, you said you're doing this. What action steps are you actually taking to do this? We're giving you action steps. We have a plan for you to follow if you want to actually meet these goals like you said you were. So here's our plan. Do this, is what that conversation looks like in an ideal world. Obviously, it's more complicated than that, but that's what we're really focusing on. Yeah, so it just really depends on the issues that we're working on. Things like waste management, again, that can be a university problem, but when it comes to like posters and things for like, put this in this bin, that can be something that's like a little more feasible that like we can do like independently. And so, yeah, so obviously we will always have to work with the university and our state legislatures, which is something that I constantly do in my job right now. Like, as I'm sure you've heard through this podcast, my life is between the Capitol and here and all of our campuses and the student government office, blah, blah, blah. Go check out our TikTok. You can see the days of my life where I'm actively doing this. Actually, I'm making a day in my life today, so you can see that one. So you can get me and Mason on the pod. Anyways.
Perfect.
So yeah, it's the Vote Riley and Ethan on TikTok if you want to see what I'm actually doing.
There you go. Plug it.
Plug it.
No shame.
Yeah. So obviously it's a lot of working with university admin and the state and all the different departments and everything for everything basically. And so yeah, it's always complicated.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. But it seems like you got a good idea of what you want to do. Is there anything else you want to talk about the 4 pillars before we move on to other questions?
I think our 4 pillars are, I think it's important to note that our 4 pillars are where we're really emphasizing, and that's going to be our presidential goals. However, obviously we still have really great committees that aren't encompassed by these goals. So like our basic needs committee, our campus, our infrastructure committees, our all of these things are still going to be committees and still going to be emphasized, and we do have separate goals within those things. These are just the 4 that we're really, really emphasizing and making sure that people see that we have clear steps on how we're doing them, because we've prioritized these to make sure they're the most pressing issues right now, and making sure that we're properly giving them their time to shine while also doing things obviously in the background, like working when there's voting on campus, making sure that students are supported in that in different separate areas, but these will be our primary focuses. Yeah, I think that's what I want to say about our pillars.
Absolutely. And if people want to read the actual pillars, there's the website. Was it Vote Riley and Ethan?
Yep, voterileyandethan.com. Also, Vote Riley and Ethan on TikTok, on Instagram. Our email is voterileyandethan@gmail.com if you have questions. Everything is Vote Riley and Ethan, so just look it up and you can get more information. Our policy pillars are out on our social medias and on our website, as well as our full campaign platform with our statements to our commitment for diversity, equity, inclusion, our letters from our candidates, and more information on me and Ethan's background, because I feel like I haven't been talking about Ethan enough. Ethan's so cool. Yeah. I feel like I always keep talking about how, oh yeah, Justin's so awesome, who's our campaign advisor, and oh yeah, Mike's so awesome, but Ethan is so awesome. He is the vice chair of our student senate, and he is also the co-chair of the vice chair of the campus safety committee. So he is very, very knowledgeable. He's been on our executive board at USG in the past, or currently he's on our executive board for USG, and so he really knows what's going on. And when you hear me talking about campus safety, it's mostly things I've learned from Ethan and Jacob Richter, who is our current chair of the campus safety committee. So these are people who definitely know what they're talking about, and I am so grateful for them. They're just doing such great work right now, and Jacob Richter is really the one who's leading all of the mass threat preparedness things right now, and he's our campus safety policy advisor for our campaign, and so making sure he gets proper credit because the things he's working on is awesome. I mean, last week at the Capitol, he was working with our legislatures to give his he made handouts. Sorry, this is another aside. He was giving handouts to all of our state legislators, giving all of the information that the university's currently done for mass threats, which is very, very little, and his proposed ideas. And so he's really working with lawmakers to turn this into requirements too. And so, yes, we're working at the university level to make sure that it's a university mandate, but then Jacob is also currently working to make sure it's a law situation where people have to comply to make sure that we are prepared for these situations. And so I have the best of the best working on this, and Ethan is one of the best, and he just is so knowledgeable in everything USG, structure-wise, who we need to talk to for what. And again, plugging my policy advisors one more time, they are the most knowledgeable in everything that we're talking about here, I think, across the university, honestly. These are the people who are on the ground doing the work in these realms, and I'm so grateful for them. Plugging Jacob, plugging Will, plugging Michaela, plugging Bryn. You guys are awesome.
No, it takes a village. It's not a one-woman show here. You know, there's a lot of people working behind the scenes. Even though you and Ethan are the ones that are on the Instagram posts, it's a lot more than just you two doing all the work. Not to diminish all the work that you're doing too.
Please, I am so happy that I have all of this support from everyone, and these are just the most knowledgeable people, and I am so confident that they are committed to making the changes that they need because they're already doing it. These are people who I actively seeing working on these things that I'm talking about right now. They're making them reality currently, and they will only continue to do that through us, through our administration, because they're policy people.
Absolutely. Stepping away now from the 4 pillars,
yes.
Just to play a little devil's advocate here.
Mason.
It's my job as an interviewer, I suppose. That's as they would say. But why do you believe students should vote for you instead of the other students who are currently running?
So I think the most important thing is I'm so student driven. Literally, like all of this week and next week, I've just been talking to students, like random students. Like when I tell you I'm talking to students, I'm not just like talking to my friends or anything like that. I'm pulling people off of the street and talking to them about issues that they're facing on campus. I'm going everywhere. I'm going St. Paul campus, West Bank, East Bank, talking to all different students and different student orgs and everything like this to make sure that I'm understanding the issues of all different people of our U of M community, because I think that's the most important thing, is engaging with students and making sure that our goals are reflective of student goals and needs. Like I said, USG sometimes feels like it's not a singular thought. That seems diminishing, but like it's mostly poli-sci people, and that's just like obviously who it attracts. These are the people who are interested in government. That makes total sense, and not diminishing poli-sci people. I tried out a poli-sci minor. I just didn't like it. Like it could have been me too, you guys. I'm not like diminishing that in any way, because it's very, very interesting and fitting for the role. However, it's frustrating when we're not talking to students, and I will always say this, is you can't make change without talking to people. I think that's the theme of this podcast. It sounds like is you have to talk to the people who are being affected, and you have to listen to them and give them what they're asking for and not just what you think that they need. And that's what I'm committed to do, is through talking to students and through bringing students to us and going to students is how we can make that change. And it's through meaningful outreach that we're able to make these changes. I can't stress enough that I'm so student focused, and that brings in all of these things. Like, I think every problem can be solved by talking to students, because they're the students who are having the problem. And if we are asking students what their problems they're facing are and what they want done about it, we have our answer. It's black and white. It's not like, it's not this big complex thing. It's giving students what they're asking for.
Right.
And that's what this job should be. Giving students what they need, giving students what they're asking for, listening to students, and representing students. That's what this job is about, is representing students. And that's exactly what I want to do, is represent students by talking to students and engaging with them. And I mean, I've learned so much. I've already said this from students, just talking to them, what their issues are, how anything from raising tuition, how it's affecting their lives, or how the DRC isn't meeting their needs, how they've been told by professors that they don't need their DRC accommodations because they have a good grade in the class. It's so wrong, and these are issues that we're not talking about at USG's. And I mean, it's currently right now, I've been talking to students about what the immigration crackdown it means for their lives and their safety, what the crackdown on DEI means for their place in this university. And these are really scary things that I think have to be addressed by talking to students, letting students lead and tell us what they're asking for and what they need, especially when we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. It's all about including people and making sure that we're asking students what they're needed, not speaking for groups of people, giving people a voice in what they want to be done and acting upon their voice. It's as simple as that. It's a really complicated and multifaceted issue. All of these are right now. Like, there's so many issues that are facing students that are so just awful and hard and complicated, and just so much. There's just so much going on. Like,
outside of academics.
I mean, one of my TAs was worried he was going to be deported, and so he didn't show up to class for a few days. Like, it's so, I mean, it's just so stressful. No one should ever be in fear of their safety, who they are, anything like that on this campus. We are here to learn and get degrees and have fun doing it, like we're here by choice. And no one should feel unseen, unprotected, unadvocated for, unsafe. And I will do whatever I can to make sure that happens, whether it's doing my street interviews with people and talking about what the issues are, advocating for them at the state legislature, bringing them to the state legislature with me to testify, collaborating with them to make the changes they want. Like, when I'm talking about like the DRC thing, the student had a really great idea on how they wanted to combat it, and I was like, can we work on this together? Can you give me your email? And so now we're gonna work on how we can streamline the DRC to make sure it's like equal across colleges, and so that there's no way that professors can just say no.
Right.
And so it's working with students to make sure that happens, and that's what I'm focused on, is making sure that student voices are heard. And I mean, that's why I chose to run. I think that this is that question. Is I was sitting in our USG office, and we had just had our one outreach event, our only outreach event that was not one of mine for Row the Vote. And no one was talking about what students said. They were complaining about the ice cream. Like, they ran out of vanilla ice cream. And I was like, that's what we got from this, is that we ran out of ice cream. We need to order more ice cream. That's the biggest thing that we learned from our outreach event. And I was just so frustrated. I was like, that can't be the takeaway, is that we need to order more ice cream. It's
absolutely not.
What did students tell you? What is going on? What is wrong? Like, what is wrong? And that's not what was being talked about. And I knew in that moment that I needed to make sure that students were being advocated for, because they were being represented and they were being talked to, and they were the ones taking the charge in what was being represented by them. I mean, our job at USG is to advocate for students to our administration, to our legislatures. We can't do that if we don't talk to them. And I've said that so many times, and I think that means we need to go to St. Paul campus, we need to go to West Bank, we need to go to East Bank, we need to go to all of the student orgs and talk to these students, because they all have different needs, and we need to meet all needs of all students. And that's my commitment, is talking to people so I can meet their needs. And that's why I think I should be student body president. And I think that's what's driving my team and driving Ethan, all of my policy advisors, I have such a wide outreach group of people working for me, and it's because we just want to talk to students and make this college better for students by listening to students and doing what they ask for. And so that's why that's why I want this position, is so that students are listened to.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, like I said earlier, I can just hear the enthusiasm and the excitement, the authenticity in your voice, and it seems like you're genuinely wanting to make positive change. So that's great to hear. For those students who would be out there thinking, why should I vote in this election? For those that would see it as pointless, maybe. Not saying that I do, but I'm sure there's other people out there that are like, why would I go vote in this election? How would you combat that language, that this election is important, that you're running for?
First, I do want to say that is the problem. We have less than, I think not even a 5% voter turnout, which is kind of crazy. So I think people don't understand what we do. I think it's as simple as that, is we are the people advocating for students, and you need someone who is going to advocate for you. And so people need to look at the candidates and see who advocates for them. And so because I think it comes down to understanding the fact that we are the people who give them their voice to administration, to our legislatures. We are the people who are advocating for these changes on campus. If you don't like something on campus, we are the people who can take action with that. Like I said, we've made Go for Chauffeur. We've made tons of positive change in our community. We've made the $15 an hour minimum wage. We've done so many things. That's our job, is to make changes for students. And so people need to know that if they want something changed, they need to elect someone into the office that is going to make changes based off of their needs.
Right. Absolutely. For those who are interested and want to vote in this election, when is the election and how do they vote?
Yes. So the election spans, you'll get an email. It's going to be open from March 24th to March 28th.
So right after spring break, basically.
Yes. I think
like a week after.
Yeah.
spring.
Not the week following, but the week following that, after spring break. And you'll get an email and you can just fill out the ballot on your phone.
So you don't have to go in person. You can just vote on your phone.
Exactly that.
Oh, that's really nice.
I know. And if you are looking to vote, I really do encourage you to check out voterileyandethan.com, all of our socials, to make sure you know what we're advocating for, because we are advocating for you. And I want you to tell us what you want us to advocate for. DM our Instagram account, email voterileyandethan@gmail.com. Talk to us. Hopefully I'll see you guys out there when I'm street interviewing.
Yeah, right. No, that's great to vote, because in federal elections, obviously you have to go to a polling place to vote. It's not secure enough to vote over email, but that you would think by making it that easy, you would get a higher turnout. So I don't know, at least for me, I just didn't know that was the case. So trying to make people informed that they can vote on a ballot via email. Is it just a Google form that you fill out, or?
Yep, you'll have to put in your U of M info and make sure you do your duo and your double two-step authenticity or whatever.
Yeah.
And then it's a ballot on your phone.
Well, simple enough.
Simple pimple. All of our candidate statements will be on there as well, so you'll be able to see one more time what each of the candidates are advocating for. For presidential election, it should only be 2 candidates. Because even to get on the ballot for us, we needed to show that we were interacting with students, so we needed 100 signatures to appear on the ballot. And so there should only be 2 presidential candidates, and so you hopefully will vote for me, guys.
Yeah, vote for Riley. Awesome. Okay, well, that's the last bit of questions I had for you. Do you have any closing remarks before we close out here?
Just that, thank you guys for listening to this podcast. I think Mason does a really, really great job the podcast. I think I'm just very, very happy that this exists, because I think the perspective of the youth perspectives is very, very important. I think people are often kind of dissuaded from taking action at young ages, and I think that you are empowering people to have opinions and to make change. So thank you, Mason, for making this podcast, and thank you, listeners, for educating yourselves.
Look at you, trying to get youthful perspectives on youthful perspectives. That's great.
Bingo.
All right, well, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. Thank you for listening to Youthful Perspectives. To the UMN students who listened to this episode, I hope Riley's genuine commitment to improving your academic lives motivates you to cast your vote for her and her running mate. To those non-students who listened, I find Riley's determination to actively communicate with those she'll represent to be quite motivating for myself to learn how I can improve the lives of those around me. Riley's knowledge in the variety of fields we discuss demonstrates her qualification for the office she seeks, and her expansive field of professional connections reinstates the effectiveness she possesses. As mentioned previously, young people in America are constantly portrayed as apolitical or uncommitted towards issues facing their lives. But if more people would take the lead as Riley has done, the amount of positive change we can create is limitless. I have been inspired by Riley's commitment towards this goal, and I hope you are too. This is Mason Bierbaum, signing off.